Pessoal, nesse episódio eu falei com Aaron Ross, autor best-seller dos livros Receita Previsível e Hipercrescimento. Com a sua metodologia de vendas, ele gerou uma receita de mais de 100 milhões de dólares recorrente na Salesforce. Se você quiser aprender mais sobre essa metodologia, escute esse podcast e, para ter acesso a esse episódio legendado, basta acompanhar o nosso vídeo no YouTube. Espero que vocês gostem.
So, first of all, Aaron, thank you very much. It's great to have the opportunity to speak with you again. And for those who doesn't know you, who never read your book, tell us a little bit about your experience here in Brazil. Most of the financial advisors use Salesforce, so that's a big part of your background. So if you could tell a little bit, how was your experience in Salesforce and what you're doing today, so people get to know you a little better.
Sure. Well, let me start out by saying that, when I did work at Salesforce.com back when it was I'll say a small company, but by small, it was still 150 people, around 20 million in revenue. So today it's much bigger. I don't know if it's like 100,000 people and 15 or 20 billion in revenue. So it's all relative. But I worked at Salesforce.com in a very junior sales job. So I don't know how the financial advisor market works in Brazil, but in the United States, a lot of people start out at the bottom. They have to do all their own work to find all their own clients and to maintain those clients. And, there's a lot of different types of businesses and lots of ways that the financial advisor businesses markets work in the United States. But that's a common one. You start out, you have to do everything yourself. So I kind of had to do something similar at Salesforce, which was like work my way up from the bottom. And I think it's important to note I went there to get a sales job specifically because I'd had a business that raised venture capital before that and it failed. It was like, I need to know sales before I do another business. Like, it's such a vital skill. My background had been more kind of product and engineering and product marketing, which is more kind of describing products. I'd done sales, I'd done painting, and did some entrepreneurial things, but I'd never done selling as a profession, like professionally and intentionally saying, here are the sales goals and here are the steps I'm going to do to meet them, and then to build a team around that. So that's why I went to Salesforce. I didn't go to make a lot of money. I didn't go to get a fancy title. I didn't go because that was like the hot company. I had no idea at the time really who they were, but I went because I need to learn this skill. And like everything else, it took longer than I wanted to, but I ended up creating a sales process and team there that was very effective in setting as many qualified or quality appointments with businesses as the sales team needed to hit their numbers. And so one thing I just want to start out with is that I know for a lot of people, they see sales and selling as something like a necessary evil, or it could be marketing, selling. I don't want to have to do it. And some people enjoy it, but I think a lot of people, it's this thing you don't really want to do. But I would say that in any business you do, it's such a vital skill to at least know how it works, if not be able to do it well, and to at least embrace it as a life skill. Because again, there's nothing that you can do in life. There are very few things you can do in life, whether you want to start a nonprofit and raise money, whether you want to start a business, whether you want to be a successful financial advisor, whether you want to get promotions. But sales and marketing kind of fits in here too, but like understanding people and how to communicate in their language. What do they want? What's important to them? Who are the right people? Like all these things that go into this is a life skill that you can never be too good at. And the worst mistake is to avoid it. Like, okay, I don't want to have to deal with that. I'm going to do so well. Like it's a hard thing to make work. It happens, but rarely, which is someone who says, I'm just going to do great work. I'm going to be so good at being a financial advisor, or I'm going to be so good at crafting, woodworking, painting, writing, that I won't have to do any sales and marketing, and my work will just bring people in on its own. Sometimes it works. It can take a long time. It'll be a lot easier, speaking from experience, if you also know how to take that, focus on great work, which is the most important thing, and learn how to be better at selling and marketing that to people, and to reach more people and have more ease of them understanding your work. So long introduction, but there we are.
Nice, Aaron. And one point that caught my attention is you said that when you enter Salesforce, you did everything, right? So you do prospecting, you do the closer, and you talk to the clients that you already sold. And that's what we see in the financial market in Brazil. And one thing that we're trying to do to some operations, to some companies, is that specializing the sales process would help them to engage better in leads, start prospecting better, making a better sales process in general. Because after advisor gets a lot of clients, he focused a lot more on his existing clients than prospecting. And I believe prospecting is a big challenge for everybody, not just for the financial advisors. And I would like to know how was to implement a new model and how was to change the view of a company like Salesforce and now the whole sales system, because now we have a specialized sales system. It's a little bit different than in technology companies than we see in the financial market. And what do you believe are the benefits that having people specialized in specific parts of the process would benefit the financial market in Brazil?
Yeah, no, great points. So I'll start by saying, I wrote the book Predictable Revenue, and that was based on, my experience starting at Salesforce.com and creating kind of an outbound sales team, which was not only about, if you haven't read the book, it's about, I created this team in this process to create a predictable supply of appointments, so predictable leads, which then made it possible to create predictable sales. So it was about that outbound process, but it was also about ideas like specializing your sales teams, right, which I actually think is a more fundamental idea, because again, this idea of dividing these jobs to be done so the team is working together is one key idea. And the other was, again, even just breaking apart the job of lead generation from the job of selling and breaking that part from the job of maintaining customers. So I would say that idea of specializing salespeople, I didn't make that up. I just observed how important it was at Salesforce. And then when I consulted with companies after that for years, when companies didn't do that, they struggled. And when they did specialize people, they were much more successful. So I'll start in the book. It says there's 4 core roles in kind of business to business sales. So outbound prospecting, responding to inbound leads like marketing leads, selling new customers, and servicing current customers. Now, here's the thing. In financial advisors, in many different markets, including software, sometimes companies should follow those types of jobs, and sometimes they shouldn't. The most important thing is the principle of being able to do fewer things better. So fewer things better, because it's really, really hard for one person to do everything, much less everything well. So this is why companies I don't know any software companies that do this anymore. I'm sure there's some out there, and this is business to business companies. When salespeople have to do everything, selling, lead generation, prospecting, responding to the leads, maintaining customers, they're going to do 1 or 2 of those things well, and the others are just not going to do well. All right, so if you have a team of 10 salespeople, you're going to have 1 or 2 people that can do really well, and the others are going to struggle, as a generalization. So to me, is if you can kind of change the environment so that people can do fewer things better and focus on the things they can be really good at, it makes it easier for everybody to do well. Now, there is I'd say that, so doing fewer things better might mean that, there's so many ways you can take that idea and apply it to a team or to a person. Common question I get is, I'm only one person. Like, how do I can't hire a bunch of people. Well, one place you can start, because there's a lot of software entrepreneurs who are one person and they have to do all these things too. So by blocking out time on your calendar is one place you can start. If prospecting is a thing you need to get to, but you're not, you can block out probably at least 90 minutes or 2 hours, 1 or more times a week. And you can make it even more effective, like going to the gym if you have a buddy. So usually if you're starting a new habit and you're getting to the things, like there's things I need to do and they're a struggle. So blocking out time on your calendar, having a buddy to show up to, having a routine, having some goals, those are all things that can help you create this habit and stick to it. Now, it might not be prospecting, it might be calling current customers for more business, whatever it is. So that's one place you can start. Another is, whether you have friends or whether on your team you have kind of a buddy system. Like some people love prospecting on places like LinkedIn. I do not. I don't like LinkedIn. I'm not good at it. I have a business partner who's really good at it, right? So he does all the LinkedIn stuff for me, and I'm a writer, right? I like to write books, not social stuff. So I think even if you have a bit of a team, you can find out ways between yourselves so that different people can kind of, be the point person on different areas and help each other out. Lastly is, There's lots of part-time contractors and people you can find off of online sources who could, for pretty affordably, do at least help out in certain areas. And prospecting may not be one of them, but like list building or content, there's so many ways you can get help on places where you don't want to do it, you're not going to be good at it, but you need to have some capability there.
Nice. And one point that you said is that sometimes you have one or two people that do well during the whole process. We have some data from Brazil last year in the financial advisor market. 10% of the professionals were responsible for 90% of the growth. And that's what we see in companies without processes, where everybody does whatever feel it's best. And the Brazilian financial market was built with bank managers leaving the banks and coming to be their own boss. How do you feel that we can change this mentality in the companies, and how do you believe that they can understand that if they do the right process, if they use a CRM, they will be more effective? Because I believe in some of the consultant works that you did, you had some resistance from salespeople, from managers. And how do you implement the idea in their head that if they do this, they will make more money, they'll be more efficient in the end of the day?
Yeah. Ultimately, most people need to see examples of other people like them succeeding before they do it. There are a small number of people, and I don't know if it's 5% or 10% or 2%, we call early adopters. And they see an idea and they're just like, that makes total sense. And they do it and they get it and they can make it work. But most people need to see, okay, I'm a financial consultant, financial advisor, or maybe I own that kind of business. For me to take the risk of changing things when I don't know, is it going to work? I don't know, like it feels too risky. And so most people don't do that until they see, oh, here's another firm kind of looks like me and they did it. And that gives me the confidence to kind of make this change. Because in a lot of times, these kinds of changes, whether you're changing the way your team interacts or compensation, again, these roles, or somehow specializing or putting in a new system or getting people to use the CRM in a certain way, could be like 6 months. It always takes longer than you think it should. It takes longer than you want. And it's often hard for entrepreneurs or executives or a lot of people who are often quite impatient. Like they've maybe been successful so far because they are a bit impatient, but when they're doing something new in this area, it's like, 6 months, which it can feel like a long time, and it's easy to give up on it. So I think they have to see examples. So I would say the sequel to predictable revenue in English was called From Impossible to Inevitable. In Portuguese, it was called Hipercrescimento. And there's a reason the first section of the book is called Nail a Niche, because this is all about, I think, oftentimes actually the most efficient way to make your business better, whether you're one consultant or a business. And I find a lot of companies, especially in Brazil, don't really spend enough time thinking about who is our ideal customer. And if you don't really think about that, whether you're an individual or a team, you waste so much time reaching out to, marketing to, or selling to people who are never going to be a good customer. It could be people that actually sign up with you, but then they fail, or people who don't sign up with you at all. And it's kind of like saying, it doesn't matter how much energy you expel. If you sell apples, you can sell and market yourself all you want to orange buyers, but you're just going to be wasting your time. So this idea of nailing a niche, just okay, who's really my ideal customer? And what are their problems? Where are they? How do they think? What kind of language would I use for them to hear me? And how do I spot the ones who aren't like that so I can move on quickly? Like that is actually probably the best place to start to kind of be smarter, more targeted, more efficient with your energy before you try to do big changes. That'd be that's why it's chapter number 1, section number 1 of the Hipercrescimento book.
Nice. And that's something that we see that the advisors here in Brazil they don't have it, not even a document with that, but they don't look into that a lot. It's basically, let's get as many leads as we can, and let's talk to them. Most of them, they'll do a no-show, they won't be in the meeting. And how do you usually do this process of nailing a niche? Do you usually do interview with some of your clients? Do you search in your database who is with you more time? What are the biggest insights that you look into when you search for your ideal customer profile?
Yeah. Well, at one level, it's pretty similar, generally whether you're a business or an individual. If you're a business, you have, again, more data. But yeah, you would look potentially in your database, which customers have been with you the longest, where you've had the highest lifetime value, and they're the happiest. So essentially, you're looking at which customers have spent the most with you, and they were the most excited to work with you, or they've been the most grateful, like the happiest. Because you could have really happy customers who barely spent any money with you. And that's not a bad thing, because we need reviews and recommendations and referrals. But ultimately, a lot of people start there. Like if you're new to the financial advisors market, if you can get any kind of customers who appreciate you and will recommend you, that's great. But over time, you want who's the highest value customers who have been the happiest or most excited to work with you. The most excited to work with you means they've got the most pain, and they see you as a way to solve that. So that can come from looking at your data. But and that does help, but I think even more important is for you to sit down, whether it's yourself or with a few people on your team, to think, okay, let's just list out who've been some of our best customers, and like, how are they similar to each other? And let's list out some people who have been terrible customers, or people who never signed up, and like, what's the difference between these groups? So for example, in financial services, you might look at, maybe you've had a lot of success with people who are in, I was going to say entrepreneurs, right? But you've had terrible success with doctors and lawyers. So maybe kind of like there's a risk profile, or maybe it was the common thread that they referred you, but they were through word of mouth, or was it that they're in a city, and so again, they have a bit more of a hunger to grow through these financial means versus people who might be in a different area who are more conservative. So you're looking at, it could be anything, could be geography, could be psychology, it could be profession, it could be how old they are, it could be do they have a family, it could be have they worked with an advisor in the past and had a bad or good experience. The thing is, there's not a way to say here are the criteria, but start off with even like 3 or 5 or 10 examples of your best customers you would love to get more of, and a few examples of the ones where this was just not a good idea. Either they didn't work out, or they spent a lot of time talking to you but didn't sign up. So basically you wasted a lot of time together. And how are those two groups different? Who needs you versus when are you a nice to have?
Nice. And one thing that you told me in the beginning, and reading your book, that's a point that you make. It took more time than you believed to build what you built in Salesforce. And we talk a lot about this in our company. Sometimes people want results really fast. And it takes time. Sometimes I'll test like one niche, I'll talk to 100 people, it will be good or probably not. But for people to understand that this is not a plug and play game, how long does it take for a company to have a good sales process, to have this implemented, to have an ideal customer really defined? Because I understand that once you go, you won't have maybe just one ideal customer profile. You have 2 or 3 or 4, but you have to test. You have to understand what is the conversion, and you probably can't do that without a tool that is a CRM that will help. So how do you see this, and how long does it usually take? What are the main gaps that people lose interest about the process? Because we understand that it's a marathon. It's not 100 meters, right?
Yeah. No, and to be fair, like again, you mentioned you do need to have some kind of CRM and people using it, which is can be its own challenging thing. So, the thing is, there's so many variables, but in general, depending on how many of these kind of puzzle pieces you need to put together, like if you're starting from scratch and you don't know your ideal customer and you don't have a CRM, and let's just assume you have some good people. That's also an assumption. And you don't have lead gen, it's something from like 6 months to 2 years to kind of really do like anywhere from 6 months, you have to build a new program. Like you're just missing, everything's working except you don't have a good CRM, right? You might deploy a CRM in 30 to 90 days, but then to get people using it and to be familiarized and to tune it, and 6 months again tends to be a pretty common thing. If you need to build a lead generation program, so content marketing, outbound prospecting, again, 6 months. And oftentimes, if you're looking at time to revenue, so in B2B software, you might have enterprise, like say 6 months of a sales cycle. And so you say, we have to build a new lead gen program. So that could take 6 months, but then that's to get a good pipeline, but we need another 6 months to start to see real revenue coming from it. So it could be a year, it could be 18 months. So I'm not saying you need to wait months to 2 years to start to see results. You should be seeing progress the entire way. So let's take lead generation. Whether that's inbound marketing, content, lead, outbound, doesn't matter. With lead generation, there'll be certain activities to lead to responses, that lead to meetings, to lead to pipeline, that lead to deals. So you can measure, are we getting responses or clicks or whatever your version is, out of, a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks. So yes, if we're getting that, then we can start to see, are those leading to the next step? So along the way, whether you're putting in a CRM, whether you're hiring a new team with a new attitude, whether you're building a new lead generation program, specializing salespeople in new jobs, you should always see some sort of progress. Now, that progress might be forward progress where you're getting better results, but it might be you're doing things and you're learning what doesn't work too. Okay, we're doing a new type of content marketing and we're not getting anything out of it. Okay, well, it's not a waste of time unless you're not learning from it. So you should always be learning and trying things the entire way as you go. So that's why it's not like 6 months of nothing and then it either works or doesn't. And you shouldn't be any surprises along the way. But I think even my business in Brazil, like Receita Previsível.com, we often recommend a lot of times, again, this 6 month to 2 year kind of time frame as a big picture expectation. And you can break that down to, hey, here's the steps that need to happen this month or the next 3 months. But you're not going to don't expect to see a lot of big revenue, a lot of great changes quickly. It happens slowly and steadily over a long period of time.
Nice. Yeah, I train jiu-jitsu for a while now, and I say that nobody gets really good in the first class. So you have to be the nail a little bit until you can be the hammer. So I think that's the idea that we can take for life.
Funny.
Yeah, that's something you learn about jiu-jitsu, or you quit, right? Because I think everything, it goes with practice, and we see that CRM, it's the same thing. If they don't practice, if they don't work with it, it's hard to understand. I like to say that in the first couple months it will be hard, but after a while you get more efficient with the tool. And we have in Brazil only 7% of financial advisors using CRM. What would be your message to them, and how do you feel that this is really important for the process? Because I like to say the tool will help, but you need the process before that. If you give me a plane, I won't be able to fly to the United States because I don't know how to drive. So how do you understand the CRM and the sales process, and what will be your message for those who doesn't use it?
Yeah, well, again, there's so many types of businesses and people in the market that ultimately you have to find a system that works for you. Just like, if you want to improve your health, some people should be vegan, some people should be carnivore, lots of people should mix, you got to find your own system. Everything. I don't think that many people should probably be vegan or carnivore. Like in the United States, I don't live in the United States anymore. I live in Scotland, United Kingdom. But I feel like the United States is a country of extremes, that extreme eating practices and extreme wealth, and extreme poverty and extreme body changing attention. But the point is that you got to find your own system. So for a lot of companies, having a professional CRM like Zoho CRM, I'm sure there's a lot of options, is the way to go if you have like a team of people. But even within that context, speaking from experience, if you have advisors who are basically at their desk all day, most of the days, it's a lot easier to have practices around updating the CRM and using it than if you have advisors who are out on the road a lot in cars visiting people in person, it's a lot harder to be consistent with a CRM. And so kind of understanding, going back to the idea of nailing a niche, if you have a company, you have a bunch of advisors, and they're kind of like your customers, right? It's going to work a lot better if you're saying, hey, we're going to roll out a new CRM or a new design of it. We're trying to reconfigure it, and you talk to them about what works for them. What do they need to put in? What do they not? What would be nice to put in, and kind of like their customers design your rollout or the redesign of your system to be more friendly to them, to make it easier for them to use. You could yell at them all you want. There's reasons why most salespeople, most advisors don't prospect enough and they don't use the CRM enough. It's not their fault, right? If 93% of advisors don't use the CRM, it's not the advisors. It's probably the CRM, the availability, or the way the CRM is being rolled out, or culture. How can I make it easier for them, more useful and better? Now, for a lot of advisors, if you're individuals or small teams, maybe something like a Zoho is too much. There's a lot of other online apps like Monday or Notion or spreadsheet like Google Docs, or, I'm just my own person for the most part. I have different businesses, but I don't, to use a CRM for me as an individual is a struggle because I'm doing a lot of different things. I got kids, I'm writing, and so I often use like things like Evernote, like a notes thing, newsletters. I kind of have bits and bobs all over, but it works for me. So you got to find something that works for you. You need some kind of system. But again, that system itself might vary a lot based on your individual, your team, bigger team, and all the other factors that go into finding something, but you need some kind of system.
Nice. Yeah. And one thing that you said about when the person is in the office, it's easier to work with the person, help them to understand better the tool. And I think that's a big part of the leadership, right? Make it easier for the advisor, for them to grow more and to understand better the process. What are the main processes that you see in leadership? And once we talk about a team, not one individual, do you understand that one CRM it's important to have the whole one process for the whole team, or I can have different processes inside the same team?
Yeah, well, I think it's important. Most executives, if we're talking about a team, like a business, they want to put too many fields in the CRM. They want the consultants, the sale, people selling or the consultants to put in too many things. There's too much stuff, right? Because yes, it's really hard. We want to measure all these things, right? We want all this data, but then it's too much work for the users. Right? And this is a problem that's been around for 20 years. I'm sure there's AI. I don't think it'll ever go away, right? This balance between we want more data, but then that requires more work, and so people use it less. It's kind of like marketing forms. The more fields you put in, the less people are going to fill it out. And so sometimes you decide that you want more fields and you're okay with fewer people entering the form because they're better qualified. Sometimes you want one field, like the email, and because you just want more people to put their email in. And that's the kind of decision for executives. It's like, what do we really need in here? How can we design it so there's fewer fields to put in as much as possible? And then one of the other challenges is over time, over the years, there's always field creep. Because every year you're like, oh, we'll just add a few more fields, kind of like feature creep in a product. And at some point you're like, wow, this just got to be too complicated. And so you need to go back and kind of redesign it. So I think that's probably the biggest challenge and pitfall of executives is just trying to measure too many things and put too much of a usage load on the consultants and the people using the system. So one point is when you specialize sales teams, or when you specialize customer facing teams, and it does make it, one of the things that works is because they're doing fewer things better. And so it's a easier load on even using the CRM. It's an easier chance to hire people because they don't have to have every skill. It's easier to train them, and it's easier to get them to work in tandem with other teams, right? It's kind of like a soccer team. Or football. I don't remember. Is it soccer or football in Brazil? What do you call it?
Football.
Football. You don't have what coach would ever tell the whole team everyone needs to attack and everyone needs to play midfield and everyone needs to defend. That would be insanity. Nobody does that. So I don't know if there's a better example of the power of getting people to focus in certain areas and do that really well, and then putting a lot more energy into how can the team work together to run the plays to win together.
Nice. And it takes a good leader for the team to work together and to have this mindset, because one thing you said is we see in Brazil that it's much more implementing a new culture than teaching everybody to click some buttons. It's they understanding that they will be better, they will grow more if they use a tool and if they use the sales process. But I believe there are some main routines that a sales leader should do with the team. Do you have these? What are the main routines that you suggest that the leader does with the team? So whole plays, one-on-ones, what do you see that gives a good result? And we try to change the word control for like to work with the person. I don't want to control anybody. I have a 2-year daughter. I can control her, so I won't be able to control anyone in my team. Exactly, yeah, my idea is to work with them so they can be more efficient. What are the routines that you see that can help this out, and what do you see in a good leader?
Yeah, well, I think there's 3 or 4 key meetings that should always be pretty similar, right? So for a sales leader, team leader, you often have kind of like a weekly team meeting, and I think those you want to keep relatively short. The challenge there is keeping enough variety so that it's not too boring. So in a weekly team meeting. And the second is, and by weekly team meeting, we phrase that should be more on kind of like the operations of the team. How is the team doing? What's coming? What any changes? Okay. What's different than that then would be a weekly improvement. Well, it wouldn't have to be every week, but like an improvement meeting. Okay, let's talk together. How are we going to get better as a team? So that might be like, even when I ran my team at Salesforce, that might be talking about here's a certain industry that we're going to learn about, like healthcare or hospitals, so we can get better at this one industry. And in fact, with that team, I had different people on the team take turns volunteering to kind of learn some topic and present it back to the team. So they also had something extra to do just to kind of shake up their day, and they can show some leadership. So that's more of like an educational function. Another one would be how do you handle your one-on-ones, or when you're doing individual coaching, how do you do that? And the fourth would be presenting up to your management. How does that go? And all these meetings you should be using the same structure. So you don't want to change the format of the meetings, but you do want to change what's in them to keep it interesting and engaging for people. I think that's why the easiest one is for example, is that kind of educational meeting where you're looking for different topics the team wants to work on and learn about and what they feel would be helpful. But those are the four kind of core types of meetings that most managers would use and have as kind of like their system, so they don't have to recreate their meeting every time they do it every week.
That makes sense. And do you usually check the same KPIs in those meetings? Because one thing we see is that when people don't use a tool, it's hard to understand how many meetings were done, how many calls were done. Do you usually have like a dashboard or something that in the team meetings, in the one-on-ones, do you follow, or do you usually like change that for every meeting?
Yeah, well, I think if I lay out kind of an ideal scenario, right, because there's so many different versions of this. In an ideal scenario, the team leader would have a dashboard, and it could lay out at a high level a few of the key metrics, because nowadays you can measure 1,000 things, and you don't want to do that. So what are these few key metrics you keep an eye on at the team level to say, all right, if you have 10 people, and maybe some of those key metrics would be there could be a certain number of activities, which could be meetings or calls or LinkedIn messages or some kind of activity gauge, maybe leads they've gotten, right? And then another meeting, something around meetings, could be proposals, meetings held, qualified meetings. Again, there's so many versions of this, but so activities, meetings. You could also do some kind of pipeline in the middle. And the last one is kind of revenue, some sort of close sign. Again, there's a lot of versions around. You might sign customers, but you don't know how much money you're going to make from them until much later. But anyway, kind of like activity, meetings, or pipeline, and sales. And so at a high level, you've got a dashboard that kind of tells you at a glance, is there anyone I should be worried about? And what that means is sometimes people may not be putting in their data, right? So who's even putting their data, or if there's things missing? And then that would usually be something you talk to them one-on-one, which is, again, taking more of a curiosity approach rather than you're doing something wrong approach, which is, okay, I see you're not putting in, the dashboard says you've got 5 meetings for this month, but you say you've got 15. What's going on? Like, I'm kind of curious, how come you have these meetings, but they're not in the system yet? And like, where are they? Like, how can we come up with a system to make it easier for you to get your data in being accurate, or at least accurate enough? We don't need 100% in the system. So that kind of curiosity approach to help them. And I think this is where this example of, one of the main messages that I have with the Receita Previsível business in Brazil is we want people to think about how can you build a culture of caring, right? And because if your people feel like you care about them, or they feel cared about, they're more likely to work to help and adapt with the team to improve the team. And I'll give one example is if you are just critical of someone, like you're not putting in the meetings, and I think most of us have probably had a manager like this, is you can tell that person doesn't really care about you. They just care about their results. You're like, screw you. But if you actually feel like, if I'm a salesperson and I feel like, oh, my manager's actually trying to help me, like it helps recreate a little bit more of a feeling, oh, I need to help myself or help them back. And so it's not what the manager says. It's more like that feeling that you're projecting. So again, this culture of caring. And my one last thing is, culture of caring doesn't mean you just that you're kind of like soft or you don't have boundaries with the team. Because again, if you really care about someone and if they're not doing well, and you maybe think they should be, they're not going to do well, like they've had their chance. If you really care about them, then you should fire them so they can go find a better job for themselves. Just one example. But I think it's going back to this dashboard around a few key metrics so you can easily spot, is there someone who's struggling either to get the data in, or maybe they're just not getting the numbers up. And then and this is what I did at Salesforce, I'd broken down the steps. So I knew that if if they did this number of emails or calls, and then they should get a certain number of responses and a certain number of meetings and a certain number of opportunities and deals. And if they were struggling, so when someone was new, I could walk them down and kind of first train them on how to get the first step. And then once I got there, train them on the second step, and then train them on the next step and the next step. And if they were struggling with one of those steps, we could sit there and problem solve it, because I knew exactly what step they were at, what they were struggling. I would sit with them at their desk and just watch what they did. And I could usually see what they were doing wrong and give them some things to practice, and they could kind of solve that bottleneck. It's harder on Zoom, but that's ideal, is that you can see who's struggling, figure out what's going on, and then zoom in with them alone to kind of problem solve where they are, whether, again, they're not doing the right things, or they're not entering their data correctly, or there's some other problem that they're facing.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And one thing that you told us is that, and we have the same feeling here at AAWZ, is that sometimes you have to let the person go. And here in the Brazilian financial advisor market, this is really hard, because I lose the AUM, I lose the clients. So this creates a huge barrier. And I believe it's even harder to manage a team when they don't do the process. Nothing happens to them. They don't lose commission, they're not let go, and nothing like this happen. What do you believe could be a good fix for this, and how do you feel? Because I understand caring would help a lot, but one thing that we feel is that it's really hard to teach someone that doesn't want to learn. How would you deal with this?
Speaking of your 2-year-old, right?
Exactly. So how would you deal with this if you had a financial advisor firm here in Brazil? Would you let it go if the person is not performing, or would you keep them because of the AUM? Because we see that in the long run, they are even a problem for the culture in the company. Because if I see that Aaron's not doing, why do I have to do this process? It just takes more time. So let me do my own way, and everybody can do their own way.
Yeah, well, I think it's a bit of a trick, and it's a bit of a question that the answer might be different based on the company and culture, because there's going to be a lot of financial advisor companies where a lot of the top people have done really well because of their relationships, maybe their market knowledge, and they're very, they're people persons. Love Brazil because people are so friendly and warm, and that has worked for them, and they haven't really needed to do a lot of the process. Okay, so there are going to be companies like that, and the advantages of letting people, these kind of senior people who've done well, ignore kind of the process and just manage their customers the way they've done it, outweigh the cost of trying to change that. But there's lots of other companies where, again, the founders, the executives, the owners are like, we want to build a company that where the rock star is the systems and the culture. We don't want to build a company of rock star advisors. We want to build a company of a rock star company system that will help lift up all the advisors in it. And that's what I did at Salesforce. I was like, I can't build a team if I'm going to try to build a team of 15 people and they all have to be rock stars, I can't do that. What I can do, though, is create an amazing system so that anyone I hire can do well. And so in that case, usually you do need to make the decision around, okay, you've got some people who are doing really well, but they are not using the system, or they're setting a bad example. And most of the time, it does make sense to change them, whether you give them a different job. Like a lot of companies, rather than going from sales, maybe they go to customer success or business development. They may not be amazing at or they might be great at relationships, but just not great in sales. So maybe put them in a place where relationships are really important. So there might be another way to repurpose the job. You might need to, at some point, let them go, but that's going to be a decision based on that company. And again, I think that's the question. Do you want to, and especially in the advisors world, where it really has been a culture of kind of, it's called rock stars, people who just are able to do it because they've had to. Is that what you're going to do? Or are you going to try to build a company that's based off of like a system of success?
That's perfect. Yeah, I believe that's the main idea that we believe here. It's much better to have a really good system with some good people as well. But if you rely on Rockstar, we have some companies here that one person is responsible for 50% of the revenue. So if that person decides to leave the company, well, you have to give them everything they want, because you won't be able to survive with them. And what for us to finish with, what would be the message that you would give to Brazilian financial market for those who want to implement a good system, not to have a company of rock stars? So what would be the advice that you give them? I believe that we are living a moment similar to what you lived in Salesforce a long time ago. We want to really change the market here. We want to really have this mindset of a good system. So what's the message to them? What's the message for those company managers that really want to make this happen?
Sure. No, I think it's like we talked about. There's a few of these key things. These are out of the books, like nailing a niche, which is knowing who your ideal customers are. When you have a team of people, trying to use the idea of specialization, so you can have people do fewer things better. So the way that you implement that might be different than anyone else. It's like, how can you do it in a way that fits your team and what you need? You do need some kind of CRM, sales system, and there's lots of ideas of books around all these things. Ultimately, it's not about copying what other people do. It's taking these good ideas, which are very important, and realizing, look, we're going to start with the best attempt at this idea. Again, it could be putting the CRM in, or a new lead generation system, or new jobs. And it's going to take us probably at least 6 months to really kind of do it and work out the kinks, so that we feel like, okay, we're seeing some success. Success. We're going to be looking for indicators along the entire way around, okay, are we making progress? Are we learning? Are we adapting? But these things do take a lot more time than we want. But if you stick to it, then you can see great results. Our Receita Previsível current CEO, Tiago, owner, my partner there, he joined in kind of 2021. And he took ultimately like 2 years to kind of restructure the whole business and redo the branding and the team and the process and document all the. And it seemed like it took a long time, but it so paid off. And the company's been growing. It's probably 2 years to really kind of tackle a bunch of these things. So, again, if you feel like you're making the right changes, if you feel like you're seeing some progress, it's okay to be patient on the results, right? On the money, it will come. If you're doing it's kind of like Buddhist, right? If you're thinking the right thoughts, you're doing the right things, you'll get the right results.
Nice. Aaron, thank you very much. Our time is almost up. It was great talking to you again. It's always a really good lecture. I really enjoyed our time, and I believe the market here in Brazil won't be the same after hearing our podcast. So once you are in Brazil, we expect to see you here. But once again, thank you very much. Thank you for your time. And I'm sure all our listeners will be very happy with the content we produced here today.
Obrigado, everybody.